This is the review for your inequalities test that's coming up. So I'm actually going to work every problem on the review because I want to make sure that you are prepared for your test and that you understand these types of problems. So it starts out with graphing an inequality. So remember, this is kind of a mini unit, so it only covers 2 sections. And the first thing that we learned how to do was to graph a linear inequality. So here I notice that it's almost in slope-intercept form, but not quite. I need to go ahead and divide everything by 3 in order to get y by itself. So that's going to give me y is less than 2/3 x plus 2. So from here, that allows me to graph. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a point on positive 2 on the y-axis because that's my y-intercept. Then I'm going to rise and run my slope, which in this case is 2/3. So I'm going to rise 2 and run 3 and put a point. Now, if I was graphing on paper, I would do this several times. It's a little bit harder for me to graph on my iPad here as I'm making this video, but you see that you rise 2 and run 3 several times to make your graph as accurate as possible. Okay? Now from there, we are going to use our symbol, so I'm looking at this less than sign to determine if my line is going to be dashed or solid. Remember, you have a dashed line if it's just less than or greater than, with no equal to. So I draw a dashed line passing through those points, and then I need to determine where I'm going to shade. So since this is less than, what I told you guys to do is to put your pencil on your line, and then the numbers that are less than this would be below it. So I am going to shade the values underneath my inequality. Underneath my line because of my inequality symbol. Now just a quick review, don't forget that the solution to this inequality would be any of the ordered pairs that fall within this shaded region. The ordered pairs that fall on the line are not part of my solution because it is a dashed line. We covered graphing inequalities for 2 days, and then we moved on to graphing systems of linear inequalities. So I have 2 problems here. Of course, I have my vertical and horizontal lines that I like to review with you guys, so we're going to start there. The first line I'm going to graph is x is less than -5. So the first thing I'm going to do, because I see x, I know that that is VUX, which remember VUX is supposed to help you remember that you go to where x is -5, and you put a point, and the V is supposed to help you remember that it's a vertical line passing through that point. Since that's a less than symbol, I know that this line is going to be dashed. Now, instead of shading, I am actually going to draw arrows pointing to where I would shade, because I'm looking for that overlapping shaded region in order to show the solution to my system. So the numbers that are less than -5 would be to the left of this line. So I draw arrows pointing left. Now I'm going to draw my line for y is greater than or equal to 6. I notice that only has a y variable, so that would be hoy. So I'm going to go to where 6 is on the y-axis, which is here. And because it is equal to, I know this horizontal line, which is what that H is supposed to help you remember, goes through +6. Now this symbol says greater than or equal to, and I know the numbers that are above this line would be greater than. Now at this point you can very clearly see that right here, if I was shading, that this portion of my graph would be both blue and green. So therefore, that is the solution to my system, and that is where I am going to shade. Now, just a quick review. Remember, the dash line tells me that those are not solutions. However, this solid line, with the exception of where they intersect, and this red portion of my graph is where the solutions for this system would fall. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next one. Now these are in slope-intercept form, which makes things a little bit easier. So for my first line, I'm going to put a point on +1 because that is my y-intercept. My slope is -2/3, so I'm going to go down 2 and over 3 and put a point. I would encourage you to do that many times on your paper so that your line is as straight as possible. My line is dashed because it is just less than right here. I would put my pencil on my line, and less than means that I shade down, so I'm going to draw my arrows down. And now I'm going to graph my second line. The y-intercept is at -2. My slope is 3/5, so I'm going to rise 3 and run 5 to the right. This is also a dashed line because it's greater than with no equal to. Because it is greater than, I would be shading up from this line, and I can very clearly see that the overlapping shaded region would occur right here in this triangular portion because I have both a green and a blue arrow pointing at one another. Now once again, because my lines are dashed, the ordered pairs that fall on my lines are not part of my solution. However, this red portion, which would be the overlapping shaded region, is where all my solutions would fall. Now on day 2 of our linear inequalities, our systems of linear inequalities, we talked about how to write the inequality for a given graph. So that's what I'm going to review now, okay? Now the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look for these symbols because that will make things just a little bit easier. So I notice that both of these lines are solid lines, so I know that I'm looking at either greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. So I'm going to use this line as green. So I know that I'm going to have my equal to, and I'm going to use this line as blue, so I know it's going to have equal to, and I know I start out with y over here by itself. Now here's the part that can sometimes be tricky. So with my green line, I'm going to put my pencil on the line where the shading is. And I see that I would have to shade down from this line in order to shade there. So that means that my symbol had to be less than or equal to. It's less than because I shaded down. It's equal to because it's a solid line. Then I'm going to do the same thing for my blue line. So if I put my pencil on the line, in order to shade here, I would have to point down. So I know this is also less than, and it's also equal to because it's a solid line. Okay, so now comes what's supposed to be the easier part. So I start with my y-intercept, and I see that these actually share a y-intercept. They both have a y-intercept of +2. So I know that the y-intercept is +2. Now I just need to figure out my slope. So for my green line, I see that if I start on +2, I would need to go down 1, 2, and over 1, 2, 3. So that makes my slope down 2, so that's -2, and over 3. So that would be, oh wait, that's over 4, I'm sorry. It's difficult to see here on my iPad. So if I go down 2 and over 4, I'm back on my line. So -2 over 4 is the same thing as -1/2 x plus 2. So I'm going to go ahead and reduce that for you guys and put y is less than or equal to -1/2 x plus 2. Now let's go ahead and look at our blue line. So if I start on my y-intercept, I would need to rise 2 and run 1, which makes your slope 2. 2 over 1 is the same thing as 2, so that would be y is less than or equal to 2x plus 2 for that inequality. Okay, let's go ahead and look at our next problem. For our last problem here, we do have multiple choice, so let's go ahead and look at it. It tells us that the graph of the system of equations, so notice they graphed a system of equations here, y equals x plus 1 and x equals 5, is shown below. Which point is in the solution set of this system of inequalities? So notice the system of equations and the system of inequalities is the same with the exception of the symbols. So in our inequalities, we have less than or equal to's. So for my top line, which would be the line that's running diagonal here, I need less than or equal to. That means I would be shading under the line. For my second line, x is less than or equal to 5, that would be the vertical line. I would be shading to the right of that, to the left of that line, because that's where the numbers are smaller. So I can see that the overlapping region would occur here. That's where my solutions are going to fall. So now all I have to do is see which of these ordered pairs would fall in that area. So -1, +5 would be up here. So I know that it's not A. 2, -3. Well, if I go over 2 and down -3, I fall within the shaded region. So I know that B works. Let's make sure that's our only answer. For C, 6, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 falls out here outside our shaded region. And then 1, 3 falls just above the line. So the answer here is B. These are not answers. Okay, if you have any questions after completing this review, and we've also done 4 days of practice in class, I hope that you come in for tutoring prior to your test, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day.